Ryan, a dedicated Navy SEAL, reached for his daily cup of morning coffee before heading to the base. But before his fingers could even touch the warm mug, his newly adopted German Shepherd lunged forward. The large dog stood perfectly rigid, blocking the table and baring his teeth directly at the dark liquid. Ryan froze as a loud warning bark filled the room. In that tense second, the soldier finally realized the invisible enemy destroying his health was not on a battlefield, but waiting quietly inside his own home. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments which country you are watching from, and if you love stories that melt your heart, please subscribe to support our channel. The storm had thrown its anger against the small coastal town for hours, shaking the glass windows and turning the ocean into a wall of dark, heavy water. By dawn, the violence stopped. The wind faded away, leaving behind a world that felt cold, washed, and entirely still. The sky broke into a sharp, clear blue, but the beach was a graveyard of broken driftwood, tangled sea kelp, and scattered shells. Ryan stood on the front porch of their wooden house, breathing in the deep, sharp smell of wet earth and salt. He was a Navy SEAL, a man defined by a quiet strength, a steady posture, and eyes that missed nothing. He had a strong jaw and short hair, a man built for endurance. He liked the heavy silence that always followed chaos. It was a simple truth he carried with him. No matter how violent the night became, the sun always found its way back. Inside the house, the warm, familiar scent of roasted coffee beans drifted through the open door, fighting against the cold sea air. Elena was already awake. She was his older sister, a woman with a gentle face, kind eyes, and hands that were always busy. She carried the soft, permanent lines of early worry around her mouth. She moved around the small kitchen with practiced care, a silent guardian of their shared home. "The coffee is almost ready, Ryan," Elena called out, her voice mixing with the distant sound of the receding tide. Ryan turned away from the ocean and walked back inside the house. He wore his NWU Type 3 uniform, the digital woodland camo standing out against the cozy domestic warmth of the kitchen. It was a rare, quiet morning before he had to report for duty at the nearby naval base. He sat down at the heavy wooden table. Elena walked over and placed a steaming black mug of coffee right in front of him, followed quickly by a plate of warm, buttered toast. She did not just serve him the food, she inspected him. Her eyes quickly scanned his face, looking for any signs of hidden pain, lack of sleep, or silent stress. She had raised him since they were young children, stepping into the role of a mother when a tragic loss took their parents away. Because of that early burden, her love for him was heavy, deeply protective, and sometimes a little overwhelming. "You need to eat more than just one piece of bread," Elena said softly, picking up a cloth and wiping the spotless counter. "I am completely fine, Elena," Ryan smiled, taking a slow sip of the bitter, dark drink. It tasted like home. "You worry too much about me?" Elena stopped wiping the counter and looked out the kitchen window toward the broken beach. "Someone in this family has to," she replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. Ryan drank his coffee in total silence. He knew very well that his dangerous job brought the shadow of loss into their peaceful home. It was a silent ghost they lived with, but never spoke about. He loved her deeply for her constant care, knowing it was simply her way of holding on to him in an unpredictable world. After he finished his breakfast, Ryan walked back outside to inspect the damage and clear the fallen branches from their front yard. The sand under his heavy boots was wet and packed hard by the rain. As he reached down to pull a heavy, broken pine branch away from the wooden fence, he heard a strange sound. It was not the wind moving through the trees. It was a low, weak rumble, vibrating with a clear warning. Ryan stopped his movement instantly. He lowered his center of gravity, letting his years of military training take over his body. He peered slowly under the broken wooden deck of the porch. There, pressed hard against the wet, freezing sand, was a dog. It was a German Shepherd. The animal was a truly heartbreaking sight to behold. It was painfully thin, its ribs showing clearly through a dirty, matted coat of black and tan fur. Its ears were pinned back flat against its skull, and its dark eyes darted around with wild, desperate panic. This was a stray creature that had fought the terrible storm all night and had clearly lost all its trust in the world. "Hey there," Ryan said, keeping his voice at a low, even rumble. The dog snapped its jaws aggressively, a sharp, defensive click that echoed in the cold morning air. It was terrified beyond measure. Ryan did not step any closer. He knew a lot about the nature of fear. He had seen it in the eyes of strong men on the battlefield, and he knew it looked exactly the same in the eyes of animals. Fear was a powerful force that made living things unpredictable and dangerous. "Elena," Ryan called out without turning his head, keeping his eyes firmly on the dark space under the wooden deck. "Bring some of that leftover meat from last night. Do not make any sudden moves when you come out." Elena stepped cautiously to the open doorway. She looked down, saw the shaking animal, and gasped softly, her hands flying up to cover her mouth. "Oh, the poor thing," she whispered. She walked slowly down the wooden steps, holding a small bowl. The very moment her shoes crunched loudly on the wet sand, the dog lunged half a step forward from the deep shadows. It let out a vicious, loud snarl, showing its sharp white teeth at her. Its whole body trembled with aggressive defense, ready to fight for its life. "Stop right there," Ryan told his sister gently but firmly. "Just slide the bowl across the sand toward me and go back inside the house." Elena did exactly as she was told, her eyes full of deep pity, and she quickly retreated to the safety of the porch. Ryan sat down slowly on the wet grass. He did not look directly into the dog's eyes, knowing that was a challenge in the animal world. Instead, he looked out at the vast rolling ocean. He decided to let time do the work. Minutes ticked by in total, heavy silence. The rich smell of the cooked meat mixed with the sharp sea salt. The dog's dark nose twitched rapidly, but its body remained frozen. It watched Ryan closely, waiting for a hidden trap to spring. Ryan just breathed deeply and evenly. He projected absolute peace from his core. He understood this broken, scared thing. War left deep, invisible scars on the soul, just as storms left physical wreckage on the beach. Growth and true healing were not instant. They were the slow, painful processes of rebuilding trust long after the wind stopped howling. "I am not going to hurt you," Ryan said quietly to the endless sea, letting the dog hear the calm, steady rhythm of his voice. "You have fought hard enough for one life. It is time to rest." Slowly, very slowly, the dog took a single, shaky step out from under the deck. It kept its body incredibly low, its belly brushing against the cold sand. It stretched its neck out, took a piece of meat from the bowl, swallowed it whole without chewing, and then stepped back quickly into the shadows. Ryan remained perfectly still, looking like a stone statue. The dog waited, watching for a reaction, and then slowly came forward again. It ate another piece. This time it did not retreat to the dark. It stood near Ryan's heavy boots, its body tight as a wire, ready to run. Ryan slowly extended his right hand, keeping his palm facing up and open. The dog froze in place. A low rumble started deep in its chest again, a final desperate wall of defense. The climax of their silent negotiation hung heavily in the crisp morning air. Trust is never freely given to strangers. It is slowly earned in the small, quiet spaces between breaths. Ryan held his hand completely steady, offering nothing but a safe harbor. The dog stretched its head forward, sniffing his bare fingers. The wild, panicked look in its dark eyes flickered and then began to fade. Then, with a heavy, long sigh that sounded like a total surrender to a kinder fate, the large, bony animal stepped fully into the light. It rested its heavy head gently right into the palm of Ryan's open hand. The dog closed its eyes, and the tight tension finally left its shaking body. It was silently asking for help. Ryan felt a strange, deep warmth in his chest. He gently stroked the dog's wet ears, feeling a new, unspoken bond form between them. "All right," Ryan whispered softly, looking down at his new companion. "You are safe now. I think I will call you Titan." 2 weeks passed since the violent storm, and the small coastal house settled into a new rhythm. Titan was no longer the shaking skeleton hiding under the wooden deck. He had gained healthy weight, his black and tan coat shining in the morning sun. He became Ryan's quiet shadow, but he also became the silent watcher of the entire house. German shepherds are born to herd and protect. Their deepest instinct is to monitor their environment. Titan sat by the kitchen door every single morning, his intelligent golden eyes tracking every small movement. He watched Elena very closely. The morning ritual was always exactly the same. The sun would just begin to paint the ocean sky with pale gray light. Elena would walk into the kitchen, her soft slippers making almost no sound on the wooden floor. She would take the dark coffee beans, grind them slowly, and boil the fresh water. She moved with the quiet grace of a woman who found deep peace in daily routine. But Titan noticed things a human eye would easily ignore. He watched how Elena's hands sometimes trembled when she poured the hot water into the cup. He watched her open a small locked drawer near the sink, a drawer she only touched when Ryan was out of the room. Titan would tilt his heavy head, his ears standing tall, processing the strange behavior. When Ryan finally entered the kitchen, wearing his usual plain gray t-shirt and dark running shorts, Elena would place the steaming black mug on the table. "Drink it all, Ryan. You have a long day ahead," she would say, her voice full of a mother's heavy, protective love. Ryan would smile softly, pet Titan's broad head, and drink the bitter liquid. He tasted nothing but the dark roast he had known for years. He did not see the sharp, questioning look in his dog's eyes. The naval base was a very different world from his quiet home. It was a place of cold gray metal, massive ships, and hard men. Ryan belonged here just as much as he belonged to the beach. His SEAL team was actively preparing for a top-secret deployment. The exact details of the mission were locked away in command folders, but the physical requirement was perfectly clear. Absolute perfection was expected. On the wet training deck, Ryan met Chief Miller. Chief Miller was an older veteran SEAL. He had a tough face that looked like weathered brown leather, a completely bald head, and a voice that sounded like crushed rocks grinding together. He was a strict man who did not accept excuses, a hard teacher who showed his care for his men by making their training much harder than any real combat they would face. "You look soft this morning, Ryan," Chief Miller barked loudly, crossing his thick, muscular arms over his chest. "We are doing miles in the water today. Full tactical gear. The ocean does not care if you did not sleep well." Ryan nodded sharply, his posture perfectly straight. "Not tired, Chief. Ready to go," Ryan replied, his voice calm and steady. But as he bent down to strap on his heavy black swimming fins and secure his diving mask, a strange, uncomfortable wave of heat washed over the back of his neck. He blinked rapidly to clear a sudden, thin fog from his vision. It was a small thing, a tiny glitch in a human machine that usually ran perfectly. He ignored it completely. Pain and discomfort were just normal information to a SEAL. He walked to the exact edge of the concrete pier and threw himself into the freezing, dark water of the bay. The cold ocean water usually woke him up instantly. It was a familiar, sharp shock that focused his mind. Today, however, the water felt strangely heavy, almost like he was swimming through thick oil. Ryan began his long strokes. 1, 2, breathe. 1, 2, breathe. The steady rhythm was usually a form of meditation for him, a quiet place where his mind found absolute peace. But after completing the first mile, a heavy tiredness attacked his body. His arms, usually built of endless power and endurance, felt like they were filled with wet sand. His heart hammered wildly against his ribs, beating much faster than it ever should for this normal pace. He tried to focus his eyes on the black rubber fins of the teammate swimming directly ahead of him. "Keep the pace, Ryan," Chief Miller shouted loudly through a megaphone from a small rubber boat tracking their progress. "You are falling behind the pack." Ryan forced his burning muscles to work harder. He pushed through the deep ache in his broad shoulders, but the strange fog inside his head grew much thicker. This was not the normal, clean fatigue of a hard workout. It was a deep, unsettling dizziness that made him feel sick. The line of the horizon seemed to tilt slightly. He swallowed hard, tasting the bitter salt of the sea, wondering if he had caught a hidden stomach virus. He refused to stop or ask for help. He finished the long surface swim, his chest pulling in the cold air in ragged, desperate gasps. When he finally climbed out of the water onto the metal dock, his strong legs shook visibly. He kept his head down so Chief Miller would not see the pale, sickly color of his face. He told himself it was just one bad day. Everyone, even a SEAL, had bad days. The very next morning, the house ritual repeated itself. The dark, quiet kitchen, the rich smell of roasted beans, Elena's worried eyes, and Titan's silent, intense watch. When Ryan reached his hand out for his coffee mug, Titan let out a very low, almost silent whine from the back of his throat. Ryan paused, looking down at the large dog. "What is it, buddy? Do you want to go out for a run?" Ryan asked gently, rubbing the dog's thick neck. Titan did not look at the door. He stared directly at the black mug on the table. Elena quickly stepped forward, wiping her wet hands nervously on her apron. "He is probably just hungry again. Large dogs never seem to know when to stop eating," she said quickly, her voice a little too loud and a little too rushed. Ryan nodded slowly, picked up the mug, and drank the hot coffee. It tasted just a bit more bitter than usual, leaving a dry feeling on his tongue. He kissed his sister's cheek and left for the military base. As he drove his truck down the winding coastal highway, the heavy fog rolled into his brain much faster than the day before. The bright sunlight hitting the ocean surface made his eyes ache deeply. His rough hands gripped the steering wheel very tight to stop them from shaking. A dark, terrible seed of doubt planted itself deeply in his mind. He was a human weapon, trained for years to be flawless and unbreakable, but he suddenly felt like he was rusting from the inside out. The afternoon schedule at the base called for a deep-water combat dive. This was always the most dangerous part of their job. Deep under the ocean, there was absolutely no room for human error. A single mistake meant quick death. Ryan and his team geared up in complete silence. They wore advanced closed-circuit oxygen rebreathers that produced no bubbles, making them invisible ghosts in the deep water. Ryan adjusted his rubber mouthpiece. His head was spinning lightly, but he bit down hard, locking his jaw in stubborn determination. He dropped backward off the edge of the boat into the deep blue void. The descent started out completely normal. 10 feet, 20 feet, 40 feet down. The bright light from the sun quickly disappeared, replaced by the dark, freezing embrace of the deep ocean. Ryan looked down to check his glowing depth gauge. The small numbers were terribly blurry. He blinked hard inside his glass mask. Suddenly, the dizziness hit him like a heavy, physical punch to the face. The dark ocean around him began to spin violently. Up and down completely lost their meaning. A wave of intense nausea rolled through his stomach. He reached out a shaking hand, desperately trying to signal his dive partner, but his arm would not obey his brain's command. It moved in terrible slow motion. The heavy, dark tiredness pulled him down deeper. His vision tunneled rapidly, the outside edges turning completely black. Panic, a wild feeling he had not known since he was a small child, exploded in his tight chest. He was actively sinking. He tried to kick his strong legs, but they felt completely paralyzed. He started to slip away into unconsciousness, the freezing water wrapping around his body like a heavy blanket. He was a highly trained SEAL, a true master of the water, but right now the ocean was swallowing him whole. Strong, panicked hands suddenly grabbed the heavy nylon harness on his back. His dive partner realized something was terribly wrong and pulled him upward hard. The fast ascent was a chaotic blur of rushing water and fading light. They violently broke the surface of the ocean. Ryan tore his mask off his face, gasping violently for air like a dying man. He choked loudly and coughed up bitter seawater. Chief Miller quickly reached over the side and pulled him into the rubber boat. Ryan lay flat on the hard floor of the boat, his chest heaving up and down, his entire body trembling uncontrollably in the warm air. The bright sun burned his tired eyes. Chief Miller stared down at him, his hard face showing a complex mix of deep anger and very rare concern. "What the hell happened down there, Ryan? You almost drowned in a simple training puddle," Miller demanded, his gravel voice cutting through the loud sound of the boat's engine. Ryan could not answer him. He just stared up at the endless blue sky, feeling completely broken and helpless. His deep confidence, built over many years of hard blood and sweat, shattered into a million tiny pieces. He did not know what invisible sickness was destroying his body, but he knew one terrible truth. He was quickly becoming a danger to himself and a fatal liability to his brothers in arms. If he could not fix this unknown weakness, he would lose the only life he knew how to live. The night after the diving incident was the longest of Ryan's life. He lay awake in his small, dark bedroom, listening to the heavy crash of the ocean waves outside his window. His strong body, usually a perfect machine of muscle and bone, felt entirely alien to him. A deep, cold fear settled into his chest. He was a Navy SEAL. His entire identity was built on his ability to endure physical pain and conquer impossible odds. Now his own body was betraying him without warning. He stared at his large hands in the dim moonlight, wondering if some terrible hidden sickness was growing inside his brain. Yesterday afternoon, immediately after they pulled him from the water, Chief Miller had sent him directly to the base medical clinic. There he met Dr. Hayes. Dr. Hayes was a new face to Ryan, a tall, remarkably thin man with very tired blue eyes and a neat, short gray beard that made him look like a weary professor rather than a military doctor. Dr. Hayes had shined a bright light into Ryan's eyes, checked his blood pressure, and listened to his heart. "Your basic vitals are completely normal, Ryan," Dr. Hayes had said, his voice calm but serious as he wrote on a metal clipboard. "But a sudden blackout in deep water is highly dangerous. It could be a rare neurological issue, an unseen tumor, or perhaps severe, delayed psychological trauma from your past deployments. The mind can sometimes shut the body down to protect it. I am taking you off active diving duty until we do a full medical scan next week." Those words echoed in Ryan's mind all night. Psychological trauma, a broken mind. It was a thought far more terrifying than an enemy bullet. He finally got out of bed, feeling a heavy weight on his broad shoulders. He needed routine. He needed a normal morning to prove to himself that he was not falling apart. He walked into the warm kitchen. The sun was just rising, casting a pale golden light across the wooden floor. Elena was already standing by the stove. She looked more nervous than usual today. Her shoulders were tight, and she kept looking toward the doorway as if she was waiting for a ghost. When she saw Ryan, she forced a quick, bright smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Good morning," she said, quickly turning back to the stove. "You slept very late today. I made eggs and bacon, and I put your coffee in a blue plastic travel cup so you can take it with you in the truck." Ryan sat down heavily at the table. "Thank you, Elena. I have a lot of medical tests at the base today," he replied, his voice flat and empty. Titan was sitting next to the refrigerator. The large dog was completely still, but his golden eyes were locked onto the blue plastic travel cup resting on the kitchen counter. Titan had watched Elena pour the dark liquid into that cup. He had watched her open the locked drawer again. The dog's sharp instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Animals do not understand complex human lies, but they can clearly smell fear, and they can sense when a routine becomes dangerous. Ryan stood up and reached his hand out to grab the travel cup. "I should get going," Ryan said, trying to push the heavy feeling out of his mind. "I will eat the food on the way." He wrapped his fingers around the warm plastic. At that exact moment, the quiet atmosphere of the kitchen shattered completely. Titan did not growl or bark. He moved with the sudden explosive speed of a wild predator. In a blur of black and tan fur, The large German Shepherd launched himself off the wooden floor. He jumped up, his heavy paws hitting the edge of the kitchen counter. With surprising gentleness and perfect precision, Titan opened his strong jaws and grabbed the top of the blue plastic cup right out of Ryan's hand. The dog bit down just hard enough to hold the plastic without crushing it completely. A few drops of dark, hot coffee spilled onto the white counter, but Titan already had his prize. Before Ryan or Elena could even process what had just happened, all 4 of the dog's paws hit the floor again. Titan turned his large body sharply and bolted straight toward the open back door. "Hey!" Ryan shouted in pure shock, his military reflexes kicking in a second too late. "Titan, drop that right now." Elena gasped loudly, dropping a metal spoon onto the floor with a sharp clatter. "What is he doing?" she cried out, her hands quickly grabbing the edge of the sink. Ryan did not answer her. He ran out the back door, his heavy boots pounding hard against the wooden deck. He chased the dog across the small yard and out onto the open, windy beach. The cool morning air hit Ryan's face, clearing the last bit of sleep from his tired eyes. He could not believe what he was seeing. His highly trained, serious rescue dog was stealing his morning drink like a naughty puppy stealing a dirty sock. Ryan ran across the soft, wet sand, his long legs quickly closing the distance between them. "Titan, stop!" Ryan commanded again, using his deep, authoritative voice. But the dog did not stop. He ran until he reached a large, broken piece of driftwood near the edge of the rolling water. When Ryan finally reached him, the scene playing out on the wet sand was completely ridiculous. Titan had dropped the blue plastic cup on the ground. The lid had popped off, and the dark coffee was spilling slowly into the white sand. But the dog was not drinking it. Instead, Titan was frantically digging a hole right next to the cup. His 2 front paws moved in a rapid, chaotic blur, throwing wet sand high into the air. He looked like he was trying to bury a highly dangerous bomb. Once the hole was deep enough, Titan used his black nose to push the plastic cup into the pit. Then he clumsily used his head and front paws to scrape the sand back over it, trying desperately to hide the object from the world. In the process, Titan had managed to cover his entire face in wet, sticky sand. The dark sand clung to his whiskers, his nose, and even the fur around his golden eyes. He stopped digging and looked up at Ryan. The majestic, fierce German Shepherd now looked completely silly, blinking through a thick mask of beach dirt. He let out a loud, sudden sneeze because the sand had gone up his nose. Ryan stopped running. He stood there on the beach, staring at the buried cup and the dirty dog. The heavy, dark cloud of fear and anxiety that had surrounded his mind all night suddenly broke. A small chuckle escaped Ryan's throat. Then it grew into a full, loud laugh. It was the first genuine, happy sound he had made in weeks. He laughed so hard his chest ached. He thought it was just a strange animal quirk. "You really hate the smell of my dark roast that much, buddy?" Ryan asked, wiping a tear of laughter from his eye. He knelt down on the sand and wiped the wet dirt from Titan's face with his bare hand. The dog whined softly and licked Ryan's wrist, his tail wagging slowly. Ryan smiled, feeling a deep wave of pure love for the clumsy animal. He did not know that the dog had not stolen his breakfast. The dog had just saved his life. The afternoon physical conditioning at the naval base was a brutal test of endurance. Chief Miller pushed the men hard, making them run 5 miles along the hot, endless asphalt of the base perimeter wearing heavy weighted vests. Ryan expected the terrible dizziness to return and drag him down to the hard ground. He waited for the dark fog to fill his brain and blur his vision. Instead, a wonderful, strange thing happened. The heavy fog completely vanished. His breathing was deep and steady, his legs felt like solid iron pistons again, and his vision remained perfectly sharp against the glaring afternoon sun. He did not feel sick or weak. He felt like a highly tuned machine, a true SEAL operating at his absolute peak capacity. When he finally returned to his quiet coastal home that evening, the cool ocean breeze felt clean and sharp against his skin. He sat alone on the wooden porch, watching Titan happily chew on a thick piece of salty driftwood. Ryan touched his own chest, feeling the strong, regular, healthy beat of his heart. The terrible, crushing fear of a broken mind or a hidden fatal sickness began to slowly fade away. He realized that the only thing different about today was that he had not consumed the dark liquid from the blue plastic cup. It was a very small, quiet thought, but it planted a dark seed of suspicion in his highly trained mind. Inside the house, the atmosphere was tight and extremely uncomfortable. Elena was cooking dinner, but her hands moved quickly and frantically. She dropped a heavy metal spoon onto the wooden floor for the second time that day, the loud clatter making her jump. Ryan walked into the kitchen and picked it up for her. "Are you okay, Elena?" he asked softly, noticing the dark, heavy circles under her tired eyes. She took the spoon with a shaking hand and forced a very tight, unnatural smile. "I am fine, just thinking about your big medical exam tomorrow," she said, her voice dropping to a nervous whisper. She turned to face him, wiping her hands constantly on her cloth apron. "Are you absolutely sure you are feeling all right, Ryan? You have been pushing yourself so very hard. Do you feel tired? You look a little pale to me." Ryan frowned slightly, studying her face. He actually felt better than he had in several weeks. "I feel completely fine, Elena. Today was a great, strong day," he replied gently, hoping to ease her mind. Elena did not look relieved at all. Instead, a fast flash of pure panic crossed her soft face before she quickly hid it away. "But the military doctors? They might find something wrong if you are too tired," she pushed, her voice trembling slightly. "It is okay to rest, Ryan. It is okay to fail a medical test if you are sick and stay home." Ryan stared at his older sister. Her deeply protective nature was normal, but this specific level of desperation was entirely new and deeply unsettling. He felt a cold, invisible breeze enter the warm kitchen. He simply nodded and walked away to his room, the seed of doubt growing a tiny, deep root. The sun rose the next morning, painting the vast ocean sky in deep shades of red and dark purple. The house woke up to the exact same familiar routine. The strong, rich smell of roasted beans filled the cold morning air. Ryan walked into the kitchen, wearing his dark running clothes, his mind sharp and awake. Elena stood by the counter, holding a fresh ceramic mug filled with steaming black coffee. "Drink this before you leave for the base," she said softly, pushing the mug toward him across the smooth wooden table. Her eyes watched his large hands with intense, unnatural focus. Ryan reached his arm out. Before his fingers could even touch the warm ceramic, a heavy, solid weight slammed hard against his leg. It was Titan. The large German shepherd stepped deliberately and aggressively between Ryan and the table. This was not the playful, clumsy dog from the beach yesterday. Titan stood perfectly rigid, his muscles tight like a coiled spring. The thick, dark fur on the back of his neck stood straight up in a stiff line. He looked directly at the black coffee and let out a sharp, aggressive, booming bark. It was a loud, sharp sound that echoed off the small kitchen walls, a sound meant to warn a pack member of immediate, deadly danger. He bared his sharp white teeth, not at Ryan and not at Elena, but directly at the dark liquid in the cup. Ryan froze completely. He looked down at the angry dog, and then he looked up at the cup of coffee. The scattered pieces of the puzzle began to move and lock firmly together in his mind. The mysterious, sudden illness, the complete recovery on the day the coffee was buried in the wet sand, Elena's desperate, strange questions about his fatigue, the dog's wild, uncharacteristic warning. A trained soldier learns to trust his gut instincts above all else, and Ryan's instincts were screaming loudly that he was standing in a dangerous minefield. Ryan needed to know the absolute truth. He could not accuse the gentle woman who had raised him without absolute, undeniable proof. He looked at his sister, whose face had gone completely pale and terrified at the dog's sudden, violent outburst. "Elena, can you go grab my truck keys from the front room?" "I think I left them on the small table near the door," Ryan said, keeping his deep voice perfectly calm and completely even. Elena hesitated for a long second, looking nervously from the growling dog to the hot coffee. "Okay," she whispered, quickly turning and walking out of the kitchen. The very moment she disappeared around the corner, Ryan moved with the silent, lightning speed of a combat veteran. He reached into his dark military backpack, resting on the floor, and pulled out a small, empty metal thermos. He grabbed the ceramic mug and quickly poured the hot, dark coffee into the metal container. Not a single drop spilled. He screwed the tight lid onto the thermos and shoved it deep into the bottom of his heavy bag. He then lifted the empty ceramic mug to his lips, just as Elena walked back into the room, holding his silver keys. "Thank you," Ryan said, lowering the empty mug and letting out a loud, satisfied breath, pretending he had just swallowed the bitter drink. He looked down at his boots. Titan was no longer barking. The thick fur on the back of his neck had fallen perfectly flat. The dog let out a soft, long sigh, sat down quietly on the wooden floor, and calmly licked his front paw. The immediate danger was gone. The animal was at complete peace. Ryan felt a heavy, freezing cold stone drop into the very bottom of his stomach. The shadow of doubt was no longer a shadow. It was a terrifying, solid reality. The invisible enemy destroying his body was not a hidden disease or a broken mind. The enemy was inside his own safe home. He picked up his heavy backpack, feeling the physical weight of the metal thermos hidden inside. "I have to go to the base," Ryan said quietly, his voice tight, not looking directly into his sister's worried eyes. He walked out the wooden door, stepping into the bright morning light, carrying a dark, heavy secret that threatened to completely destroy his entire world. The drive to the naval base felt much longer than any dangerous combat mission Ryan had ever faced in his entire military career. His heavy truck moved smoothly down the familiar coastal highway, but inside the small cabin, the air was thick and incredibly hard to breathe. The small metal thermos sitting quietly inside his black backpack felt like an active bomb waiting to explode. He kept his eyes fixed straight ahead on the gray road, desperately trying to push down the rising panic in his chest. He thought about his SEAL team, about Chief Miller, and about the deep, unbreakable trust they all shared. A soldier's life depends entirely on the physical strength and mental focus of the man fighting right next to him. If Ryan was somehow compromised, his brothers in arms were in immediate, deadly danger. That single, powerful thought forced his hands to keep a tight grip on the steering wheel. He parked his truck near the large concrete medical building on the base and walked inside. His heavy combat boots made loud, rhythmic echoes in the long, empty hallway. He deliberately bypassed Dr. Hayes' main office and walked straight down the stairs into the restricted basement level, heading directly toward the secure toxicology lab. The air down here was cold and smelled strongly of sharp bleach and clean metal. He knocked firmly on the heavy glass door. A young man wearing a crisp, perfectly clean white lab coat opened it. This was Specialist Vance. Vance was a new Navy technician in his early 20s with pale skin from working indoors all day, neat blonde hair, and very sharp, focused green eyes behind thick, black-rimmed glasses. He looked exactly like a quiet man who loved reading numbers and complex chemical formulas much more than he loved making casual human conversation. "Can I help you, Petty Officer?" Vance asked, his voice crisp, polite, and completely professional. Ryan reached into his bag, pulled out the cold metal thermos, and placed it very carefully on the shiny steel counter. "I need a complete chemical breakdown of the liquid inside this container," Ryan said, keeping his deep voice perfectly steady, hiding the violent emotional storm raging inside his chest. "I need to know exactly what is in it, and I need it done quietly, completely off my official medical record for now." Vance adjusted his thick glasses, looking closely at Ryan's serious, rigid face. The young technician quickly recognized the intense, uncompromising look of a Special Forces operator. "Understood," Vance replied simply, taking the metal thermos with a blue-gloved hand. "It will take about 2 hours to run a full spectrum analysis. You can wait on the chairs right outside." Ryan walked back out and sat down heavily on a hard plastic chair in the cold, empty waiting room. The bright, white fluorescent lights hummed with a low, annoying electrical sound above his head. With absolutely nothing else to do, his tired mind began to drift backward in time. A heavy, dark wave of deep, crushing guilt washed entirely over his soul. He was a highly trained soldier, a man taught by the government to identify, track, and destroy dangerous enemies. But right now, sitting in this quiet hallway, he felt like a terrible traitor. He closed his eyes tightly and saw a clear image of Elena. He did not see the nervous, shaking, fragile woman from this morning. Instead, he saw the brave, fiercely strong girl from their difficult past. He vividly remembered the terrible, rainy day the police officers came to their front door to tell them their parents were gone forever. He was only a very small, frightened boy, crying and deeply confused, but Elena had stood incredibly tall. She was only a young teenager, but she became a full mother in a single, painful heartbeat. Ryan remembered the long, incredibly hard years that followed that day. He remembered Elena working 2 difficult, exhausting jobs, coming home very late at night, with her soft hands raw and smelling of cheap restaurant grease. He remembered his 12th birthday vividly. He had wanted a new leather baseball glove so badly. Elena had secretly saved her tiny tips for many months just to buy it for him, completely ignoring her own desperate need for a new, warm winter coat. He remembered the freezing winter when their house heater completely broke. Elena had wrapped him tightly in every single blanket they owned and sat shivering in a cold chair all night just to make sure he stayed warm. She had willingly sacrificed her best youth, her personal freedom, and her own private dreams just to make sure Ryan had a safe, normal life. She was his absolute protector, his permanent shield against a cold, unforgiving world. And now he was sitting alone in a sterile military basement, secretly testing her daily gift of morning coffee for poison. The slow, steady ticking of the round clock on the white wall sounded exactly like a heavy metal hammer hitting a long nail directly into his chest. His stomach twisted into tight, painful knots. The guilt he felt was a real physical pain, feeling much worse than the freezing ocean water or the burning muscles from his brutal training. He leaned forward, resting his heavy head in his large, calloused hands. He desperately told himself he was just going crazy. The extreme mental stress of his upcoming combat deployment and the severe physical exhaustion of his daily training were simply breaking his mind into pieces. He was creating a terrible, evil monster out of pure, innocent love. He was becoming completely paranoid, seeing invisible, deadly threats in his own kitchen where there was only his gentle family. He almost stood up from the chair. He almost walked right back through the glass door into the lab, grabbed the metal thermos from Specialist Vance, threw it straight into the nearest trash can, and drove his truck as fast as he could back home. He wanted to hug his older sister and beg for her forgiveness for ever doubting her pure heart. But then the crystal-clear image of Titan flashed violently in his dark mind. He remembered the heavy, stiff posture of the large dog, the thick fur standing straight up on its neck, the wild, desperate warning bark, and the immediate, total peace that followed when the cup was finally hidden away. Animals do not lie. They do not have complex human imaginations, and they do not suffer from combat trauma. They only know exactly what is real in the physical world. Titan had clearly smelled danger. Ryan forced his heavy body to stay glued to the hard plastic chair. He had to know the absolute truth, even if that truth was going to completely destroy his heart. He owed it to his brave teammates, and he owed it to himself. The heavy glass door finally clicked and opened loudly. The sudden noise made Ryan jump slightly in his seat. Specialist Vance walked out into the cold waiting room, holding a printed sheet of white paper in his hands. The young technician did not look polite or calm anymore. His sharp green eyes were wide open with genuine shock and deep concern. He walked over slowly and handed the paper directly to Ryan. I ran the test 3 separate times to be absolutely sure of the results, Vance said, his voice dropping to a low, serious whisper so no one else could hear. The base liquid is just normal, dark roast coffee, but there is a secondary chemical compound completely mixed into it. Ryan stared down at the black ink on the paper, but the complex scientific names and numbers meant absolutely nothing to him. "Give it to me in plain, simple English, Vance," Ryan commanded gently, his throat feeling incredibly dry and tight. "What exactly did you find in my drink?" Vance swallowed hard, looking nervously down the empty hallway. "It is a low-grade synthetic nervous system depressant," the young man explained very clearly. "It is completely odorless and totally tasteless when mixed with a strong, bitter liquid like dark coffee. It is a very specific type of powerful muscle, relaxant, and sedative. In a high, concentrated dose, it would put a large man to sleep almost instantly. But in this very small, steady daily dose, it just acts like a slow, quiet poison to your physical endurance. It lowers your heart rate unnaturally, causes severe dizziness under heavy physical stress, and completely ruins your muscle stamina. It is perfectly designed to mimic a serious natural illness without leaving any obvious permanent toxic traces in a standard military blood test." The words hung in the cold, quiet air, feeling much heavier than solid lead. It was not a brain tumor. It was not a psychological breakdown from war. It was completely intentional. Every single morning, with a warm, comforting smile and a loving, gentle voice, the absolute only person he completely trusted in the whole world had been slowly taking away his life and his strength. Ryan felt his breath catch sharply in his chest. A deep, freezing cold darkness suddenly swallowed his entire world. He nodded silently, thanked the young specialist, folded the white paper perfectly in half, and walked slowly out of the building. His heart did not just break in that moment. It shattered completely into a million tiny, sharp pieces that cut him perfectly from the inside out. The drive back to the quiet coastal town was a blur of gray roads and fading sunlight. Ryan did not remember turning the steering wheel or stopping at the traffic lights. His physical body was functioning on pure, deeply ingrained military habit, but his mind was trapped in a dark, freezing void. He parked his heavy truck in the driveway. The small wooden house looked exactly the same as it had this morning. The porch light was on, casting a warm, welcoming yellow glow against the coming night. It looked like a safe harbor, but Ryan now knew it was a trap built on lies. He sat in the driver's seat for a long time, listening to the rhythmic crash of the ocean waves in the distance. He took a deep, shaky breath, gathering the scattered pieces of his broken heart, and stepped out into the cool evening air. He walked up the wooden steps, his heavy combat boots making no sound. When he opened the front door, the smell of roasted chicken and warm garlic bread filled the hallway. It was a perfectly normal, loving domestic scene. Elena was standing in the kitchen, wiping the clean counter with a white cloth. When she heard the door close, she looked up and smiled. "You are home late, Ryan. How were the medical tests?" she asked, her voice light and seemingly full of innocent care. Ryan did not smile back. He did not take off his dark jacket. He simply walked into the kitchen and stood entirely still, looking at her with cold, empty eyes. The silence in the room quickly became heavy and suffocating. Elena stopped wiping the counter. Her forced smile slowly melted away, replaced by a deep, nervous tension. She took a small step backward. "Ryan, what is wrong? You are scaring me," she whispered, her hands dropping to her sides. "I did not go to the medical clinic today, Elena," Ryan said. His voice was not loud, but it was dangerously calm and completely flat, like the surface of the ocean right before a massive storm. "I went to the secure toxicology lab in the basement. I asked them to test my morning coffee." Elena froze completely. The color drained out of her soft face in an instant, leaving her looking like a pale white ghost. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She quickly shook her head, trying to build a wall of denial. "I do not know what you are talking about. Test the coffee? Why would you do that? "You're acting crazy, Ryan," she stammered, her voice shaking violently. She reached out her hand toward him, playing the role of the concerned older sister. Ryan did not move away. He slowly reached into his dark jacket pocket, pulled out the white piece of paper Specialist Vance had given him, and placed it flat on the wooden dining table. He pushed it slowly across the smooth surface until it stopped right in front of her shaking hands. "It is a synthetic nervous system depressant," Ryan stated clearly, watching her eyes track the dark ink on the paper. "It slows the heart. It destroys muscle stamina. It causes severe dizziness underwater. You have been quietly poisoning me every single morning so I would fail my deployment physical. You almost killed me in the deep water yesterday." Elena stared down at the laboratory report. The solid, undeniable proof of her dark secret was sitting right there in the bright kitchen light. The heavy wall of lies she had built finally collapsed. Her knees gave out, and she sank heavily into one of the wooden dining chairs. She covered her pale face with both of her hands, and a terrible, broken sob tore through her throat. She cried with the loud, desperate agony of a person who had carried a massive, crushing weight for far too long. From the dark corner of the living room, Titan heard the sharp sound of human pain. The large German shepherd stood up slowly. Earlier that morning, he had aggressively bared his teeth at the poisoned cup to protect his master. But dogs do not hold human grudges, and they deeply understand the pure emotion of sorrow. Titan walked quietly into the kitchen. He did not growl. He approached the crying woman with slow, gentle steps. He wedged his large, heavy body directly between Ryan and Elena. Then Titan lifted his dark head and rested his chin firmly on Elena's shaking knees. He let out a very soft, long whine, gently nudging her wet hands with his wet nose, offering silent, pure comfort. Ryan stood perfectly still, watching the incredible scene. His fierce anger, the hot rage of a betrayed soldier, began to crack slightly. He saw that Titan did not view Elena as a dangerous enemy anymore. The wise animal saw her as a deeply wounded member of their small pack. "Why, Elena?" Ryan asked, his deep voice finally breaking with raw emotion. "Why would you do this to me? I trusted you more than anyone else in this entire world." Elena slowly lowered her hands. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face wet with endless tears. "Because I could not watch you die, Ryan," she cried out, her voice rough and broken. "I could not let them take you away from me and send you back in a wooden box. I just wanted you to fail the physical test. I just wanted them to keep you here, safe on the base, doing paperwork. I researched the drug for months. It was supposed to be completely temporary. It was never supposed to hurt you permanently. I was trying to save your life." Ryan shook his head in deep disbelief. "By stealing my life away from me? By making me doubt my own mind and body? That is not love, Elena. That is pure control. I know my job is dangerous, but we have already survived the worst thing imaginable. We survived the car crash that took Mom and Dad. We know how to live through grief." Elena looked up at him, her wet eyes suddenly filling with a new, terrifying level of pain. She took a deep, ragged breath, shaking her head slowly. "No, Ryan, we did not survive a car crash," she whispered, her voice dropping into a dark, hollow echo. "That was the first lie I ever told you, and it poisoned everything else." Ryan frowned deeply, a cold wave of severe confusion washing over him. "What are you talking about?" he demanded softly. Elena reached out and gently stroked Titan's thick fur, gathering the last of her broken courage. "I was 16 years old. You were only 6, Elena began, her eyes staring at a memory playing out on the kitchen wall. "It was raining so hard that afternoon. You were asleep in your room. Someone knocked on the front door. When I opened it, there were no police officers. There were 2 men in perfectly pressed green army dress uniforms." She paused, her whole body trembling at the memory. One of them was Captain Davis. He was a tall, incredibly stiff man with gray hair and dark eyes that looked entirely empty, like a man who had delivered too much bad news in his life. The other was a young military chaplain holding a black Bible. Captain Davis held out a yellow envelope. He told me that our father's unit had been ambushed in the mountains overseas. Our father did not die in a random car crash on the highway, Ryan. He was a soldier. He died in a muddy ditch in a foreign country, thousands of miles away from us. Ryan stepped backward, hitting the kitchen counter. The air vanished from his lungs. His entire childhood history, the foundation of his reality, was instantly rewritten. "Why did you not tell me the truth?" Ryan asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Because you worshipped him," Elena cried, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "If I told you he died a war hero, I knew exactly what you would do. I knew you would grow up and follow his exact footsteps. I wanted to protect you from this life. I wanted you to be a doctor or a teacher or anything safe. I lied about the car crash to keep you away from the military, but it did not work. The blood was already in your veins. You joined the Navy anyway. You became a SEAL. You became exactly like him." She leaned forward, burying her face in Titan's dark fur. "When you got these new secret deployment orders, the terror came back. I kept waking up in the middle of the night, hearing Captain Davis knocking on our front door. I was trapped in that rainy afternoon. I lost our father to this war, Ryan. I simply could not let the military take you, too. I am so deeply sorry. I was just so completely terrified." Ryan stood in the quiet kitchen, the heavy silence broken only by his sister's quiet sobs and the gentle breathing of the dog between them. The bitter anger inside his chest slowly melted away, replaced by a profound, heartbreaking tragedy. He finally understood the dark, twisted root of her betrayal. It was not born from malice or evil. It was born from a desperate, suffocating trauma that had secretly haunted her for her entire life. She was not a monster. She was just a terrified 16-year-old girl, still standing at the front door in the rain, desperately trying to keep her family alive. The kitchen remained perfectly still, the heavy silence broken only by Elena's quiet, broken breathing and the soft sound of Titan's tail hitting the wooden floor. Ryan stood frozen against the counter, the heavy weight of the new truth washing over his tired mind. For his entire life, he had believed a simple, tragic story about a random car crash. Now, the dark reality of their father's violent death on a foreign battlefield changed everything. He looked down at the fragile woman sitting on the chair. She was no longer the strong, invincible older sister who had cooked his meals, bought his clothes, and protected him from the cold world. She was just a deeply traumatized 16-year-old girl who had never truly stopped waiting by the front door in the rain, terrified of the next knock. A cold, hard anger had burned inside his chest just 10 minutes ago, demanding harsh justice for her betrayal. But as he watched her bury her tear-stained face into the dog's thick fur, that sharp anger completely dissolved. It was replaced by a profound, aching sorrow. A true soldier is taught to identify his enemy, but Ryan knew with absolute certainty that there was no enemy in this warm kitchen. There was only a deep, unhealed wound born from blind love. He took a slow, deliberate step forward. He did not yell, and he did not turn his back and walk out the door. Instead, Ryan dropped to his knees on the hard wooden floor right next to her. He reached out his large, strong arms and wrapped them tightly around her shaking shoulders. He pulled her close to his chest, burying his face in her hair. "I am so sorry you had to carry that terrible secret all alone, Elena," Ryan whispered, his deep voice thick with his own unshed tears. "You saved my life when we were kids. You gave up everything for me. I'm not angry anymore. I understand why you did it, but you have to let me go now. You have to let me be the man our father was." Elena held on to his shirt desperately, crying until there were no more tears left in her tired eyes. In that quiet embrace, the dark poison of lies and fear finally left their home, replaced by the painful, beautiful light of absolute forgiveness. The following 2 weeks brought a massive physical transformation. With the toxic, dark liquid completely gone from his morning routine, Ryan's body rapidly rebuilt its natural strength. The terrible, heavy fog lifted completely from his brain, leaving his thoughts sharp and incredibly clear. The random bouts of dizziness vanished, and his lungs expanded fully, pulling in the salty ocean air with pure, effortless power. When the morning of the official deployment medical exam arrived, Ryan drove to the naval base, feeling like a completely new man. He walked into the bright, sterile medical center and was directed to the examination room of Dr. Aris. Dr. Aris was the senior medical evaluator for special operations. She was a short, intimidating woman in her late 50s, with sharp, calculating gray eyes, silver hair pulled back into a very tight, neat bun, and a completely no-nonsense attitude that made even the toughest combat veterans nervous. She wore a spotless white coat over her dark uniform and held an electronic tablet. "Take off your shirt and step onto the treadmill, petty officer," Dr. Aris commanded, her voice crisp and efficient. "We are going to push your heart to the absolute maximum limit today. If you have any hidden weakness, I will find it." Ryan did exactly as he was told. The machine started at a fast run and slowly increased its steep incline every 3 minutes. Ryan ran. He focused his eyes on the blank white wall ahead of him, his breathing falling into a perfect, rhythmic cycle. Sweat poured down his face and chest, but his legs moved like unstoppable iron pistons. He ran for an incredibly long time, far surpassing the standard baseline for his elite unit. The steady, fast beeping of the heart monitor filled the small room, showing a perfectly healthy, incredibly strong cardiovascular system. After the treadmill, Dr. Aris put him through a brutal series of underwater breath-holding tests and complex cognitive puzzles designed to test his brain under extreme physical stress. Ryan dominated every single obstacle without a single moment of hesitation or weakness. "Finally, Doctor." Aris lowered her electronic tablet and looked at him with a rare, small nod of genuine respect. "Your vitals are absolutely perfect, Ryan. You're operating at peak human capacity," she said, tapping her digital pen on the screen. "I am officially clearing you for active combat deployment. Good luck out there, sailor." Ryan smiled, thanking her quietly. He walked out of the clinic feeling a massive weight lift off his shoulders. He was finally ready for the war. The final night before his scheduled departure arrived quickly. The small coastal house was quiet, filled with the soft, distant sound of the dark ocean crashing against the sandy beach. The tense, suffocating atmosphere from the past few weeks was completely gone, replaced by a sad but peaceful acceptance. Ryan stood in his small bedroom, carefully packing his green canvas duffel bag. He folded his dark uniforms, checked his heavy boots, and organized his gear with practiced, silent efficiency. Elena stood leaning against the wooden doorframe, watching him with soft, tired eyes. She was no longer shaking, and she was no longer trying to stop him. The brutal honesty of their previous confrontation had finally broken the invisible chains of her deep trauma. She had spent the last 2 weeks talking openly about their father, sharing old, happy memories instead of hiding behind a wall of terrible fear. Titan sat patiently on the woven rug right next to Ryan's heavy bag, his golden eyes watching every single movement. The large German shepherd seemed to completely understand the heavy importance of this specific night. He did not whine or pace around the room, he just sat like a loyal, silent guard. Ryan zipped the heavy canvas bag closed and stood up. He looked at the large dog, and then he looked at his older sister. He walked over to his wooden desk, picked up Titan's thick leather leash, and walked slowly toward the doorway. He stopped right in front of Elena and gently placed the leather strap directly into her soft hands. She looked down at the leash, a look of mild confusion crossing her gentle face. "You are not taking him to the base kennels?" she asked softly. Ryan shook his head slowly, a warm, loving smile touching his face. He reached out and gently stroked Titan's dark, broad head. "No, I am not taking him with me," Ryan replied, his deep voice carrying a quiet, absolute certainty. "I brought him inside from the storm, but I think he was always meant to be your dog, Elena. He watched over you when I was blind to your pain. He protected me when I was in danger. True love is not about locking each other in a cage, but about keeping each other in peace. I have to go face my own storms now, but Titan will stay right here. He will protect you in my place." Elena gripped the leather leash tightly in her hands. Tears welled up in her eyes, but this time they were not tears of pure terror. They were tears of deep healing. She looked down at the large dog. Titan looked up at her, let out a soft sigh, and gently leaned his heavy, warm body against her leg. Elena looked back at her brother and gave him a brave, genuine smile. "Come home safe, Ryan," she whispered into the quiet night. "We will be right here waiting for you." 6 months passed slowly since the heavy green canvas bag disappeared down the winding coastal highway. In the small wooden house by the sea, the heavy, suffocating silence of constant fear was gradually replaced by the steady, comforting rhythm of genuine healing. Elena woke up every single morning to the bright sun, no longer dreading a dark storm. Her daily routine changed entirely. She still ground the dark coffee beans, but she never opened the small locked drawer near the kitchen sink. On the very first day after Ryan left, she had taken all those small glass bottles, carried them out to the outside trash bin, and completely destroyed them. Instead of constantly worrying about invisible dangers, she focused her mind on the large, living presence of Titan. The German Shepherd was a constant, solid anchor for her fragile mind. When the sharp, loud ring of the telephone echoed suddenly through the quiet hallway, Elena did not freeze in pure terror anymore. In the dark past, that sudden sound would send her mind violently back to a rainy afternoon and 2 green uniforms standing at the door. But now, Titan would calmly walk over, sit right next to the ringing phone, and look up at her with gentle, golden eyes. He grounded her firmly in the present moment. She learned to pick up the plastic receiver with a completely steady hand, finally accepting that she simply could not control the vast, dangerous world. She understood that trying to stop the wind from blowing only ends up destroying the house. She accepted Ryan's chosen path. She let go of the heavy ghost of their father, choosing to honor his brave memory with quiet pride instead of suffocating panic. She and the large dog took long walks on the wet sand every evening, watching the ocean tide roll in and out, finding a deep, lasting peace in the steady cycles of nature. Thousands of miles away, the world was not peaceful at all. The air was brutally hot, thick with fine yellow dust and the sharp metallic smell of fired weapons. Ryan and his SEAL team were pinned down tightly behind a crumbling stone wall in a narrow, forgotten mountain pass. The enemy ambush had been incredibly sudden and fierce. Beside Ryan knelt Corporal Jenkins. Jenkins was a very young, highly nervous communications expert on his very first combat tour, a short man with a pale face, wide brown eyes, and a jagged white scar completely crossing his chin. "We are completely cut off, Petty Officer," Jenkins shouted loudly over the deafening roar of incoming rifle fire, his dirty hands shaking violently as he tried to grip his plastic radio receiver. "They are flanking us from the high rocky ridge." 6 months ago, with poison running quietly through his veins, Ryan would have failed his men in this exact moment. The extreme stress, the blazing heat, and the heavy tactical gear would have triggered severe dizziness. His heart would have slowed dangerously, and his vision would have faded into a dark, helpless tunnel. But today, Ryan was a perfect, healthy weapon. His mind was incredibly clear, processing the chaotic battlefield with cold, mathematical precision. His lungs pulled in the hot, dusty air without burning. His strong legs held his heavy body perfectly steady. "Stay down, Jenkins, and keep transmitting our exact coordinates," Ryan commanded, his deep voice cutting through the young man's panic like a sharp knife. Ryan did not wait for the enemy to surround them completely. He moved with explosive, terrifying speed. He sprinted away from the safe stone wall, running directly up the steep, rocky incline. Bullets hit the dry dirt all around his heavy boots, but his physical stamina was absolutely endless. He reached the upper ridge, flanked the enemy shooters, and unleashed a precise, overwhelming wave of covering fire. His physical perfection, the pure result of a clean body and a focused mind, gave his team the crucial seconds they needed to fall back to a safe helicopter extraction point. He saved his men because he was finally allowed to be strong. The coastal town was bathed in brilliant, warm sunlight. The violent, dark storm from almost a year ago felt like a very distant dream. The sky was an endless, clear blue, and the ocean waves were calm and gentle, rolling softly onto the white beach. Elena walked along the edge of the sparkling water, wearing a light blue sweater, the cool breeze catching her hair. Titan walked happily by her side, occasionally stopping to sniff a piece of green sea kelp or a broken white shell. He was no longer a scared, starving stray hiding under a porch. He was a majestic, powerful protector enjoying his territory. Suddenly, Titan stopped completely dead in his tracks. His large, pointed ears rotated forward like perfect radar dishes. His black nose lifted high into the salty air, twitching rapidly as he analyzed a microscopic scent carried on the ocean wind. It was a scent hidden deeply beneath the smell of salt and fish, a highly familiar mix of dark coffee, worn green canvas, and a specific human warmth. Elena looked down, noticing the sudden, intense change in the dog's rigid posture. "What is it, Titan?" she asked softly, touching his head. Titan did not bark. Instead, he let out a loud, joyful whine that vibrated deep in his broad chest. He turned his large body away from the water and looked straight down the long stretch of the sunny beach. A tall, solitary figure was walking slowly across the sand, carrying a heavy green duffel bag over one broad shoulder. He wore plain civilian clothes, but his straight, confident military posture was completely unmistakable. It was Ryan. Titan did not wait for a human command. The massive German shepherd dug his strong back paws into the wet sand and launched himself forward. He ran like a dark arrow released from a tight bow, his powerful legs eating up the distance with incredible, explosive speed. White sand flew high into the air behind him. Ryan saw the dog coming. He quickly dropped his heavy green bag onto the ground and opened his arms wide, just as the large dog crashed directly into his chest. Titan whined loudly, licking Ryan's face frantically, his thick tail wagging so hard it shook his entire body. Ryan laughed, a deep, rich sound of pure joy that echoed clearly over the peaceful ocean. Elena started to run too. Tears of absolute happiness streamed rapidly down her face, but she did not try to wipe them away. When she finally reached them, Ryan stood up and wrapped his strong arms securely around her, pulling her into a tight, incredibly warm embrace. Titan leaned his heavy body against their legs, completely uniting the small family once again. "You came back to us," Elena cried softly against his shoulder, her voice full of relief. "I told you I would always come back," Ryan whispered, closing his eyes against the bright, warm sun. Standing there on the safe beach, Ryan finally understood the absolute truth of their long, difficult journey. We cannot ever avoid the painful reality of loss or hide forever from the unpredictable dangers of the world. Life will always bring dark storms, deep water, and sudden ambushes. But deep, honest love, completely free from the heavy chains of fear and control, will always give us the pure strength we need to face the wind, survive the longest nights, and eventually find our way back home. What about you? Have you ever held on to someone or something too tightly out of fear? Or have you ever had to find the incredible courage to let someone go face their own battles? I would really love to hear your thoughts and personal experiences. Please share your own stories with our community in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or gave you a new perspective today, please hit the like button and share this video with someone who might really need to hear this message. And please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue to bring you more inspiring stories about the beautiful, healing bond between humans and animals. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next video.